Whoa! Hey there! How'd you get in my house? And what are you doing here? Wait a minute. You want to learn about copper, don't you? Well, you've come to the right place. Copper is reddish brown. It's used in a lot of things. It's a transition metal. It is atomic number 29. It has a mass of 63.5. Copper can be formed into wire, which means it is ductile. Therefore, it is also a fairly soft metal. Did you know that copper acetate is a pesticide? Now, the most interesting fact about copper, which is really important, and you're going to love this fact, it is one of the best conductors of heat and electricity. Now, I know you're all saying, wait a minute, maybe that's why it's used in a lot of things. Yep, I know you said that, right? It just came into your mind instantly. Well, because it conducts heat really well, they can use it in stuff like heat sinks, or, for example, if you have something really hot and you want to make it colder or cooler, you put some aluminum. So let's say this thing here is really hot, right? This thing here, it's like a motor or something, and it gets really hot, like 100 degrees centigrade or whatever, and you need to keep it at like 80 degrees centigrade. So you put this heat sink around it. This hand of mine is a heat sink, right? And it looks like this, and you put this around it, and so what it does is this hot motor or whatever is touching the copper, right? Because they use copper in the heatsink. And so since the copper conducts the heat really well, it absorbs all the heat from this hot item, and then it sends it through all these little fins of copper, and then from there you can like blow a fan through here, like some air, and that would take all the heat into the air. Which is why it's using, it does that really well. So it's using heat sinks, and it's a really good conductor of electricity, and that's why it's used a lot in electrical stuff. For example, I have this hard drive here, and no, this part isn't the copper. If you look here, you see this component board, or PCB, and on it there's a whole bunch of chips and resistors and capacitors and stuff, and if you look closely, there's these little traces that connect everything. Like right there. Or right here with the little holes. Those are all copper. They carry all the electricity to the components. Like, for example, if you need to connect this pin right here to this pin right here, then you have this little copper trace that connects the two. And so it's used mainly in these things. It's also used in wire. As you can see here, I have some copper wire with me. Why isn't it reddish brown on the ends? Because I've soldered it. But anyways, if you look closely, it's reddish brown in the clear insulation. Copper wire. Here's some more copper wire. And copper is also used on like hobbyist component boards, like here, these little circles of copper, because they conduct the heat well. So the solder that you use, the silver stuff to connect the components, flows onto it easily, and it's really good for electricity. It's also used, here's another component board under these little traces behind here. You can also see it on this little toy car, on the traces once again. These little lighter green parts. Under those is a whole bunch of copper. Or this component board that I made. Under the lighter green parts are all copper. Here's one without the green layer, as you can see. I didn't make this one though. It's all copper. Also used in this laser right here. It's used in this laser. It's used in this laser. And it's used in this sled assembly in your CD drive. It's used in your Palm Pilot. It's also used in that do-it-yourself laser power meter that you built laying around in your house, in the component boards, in the wires. And basically, it's used in almost everything electrical. Did you know that copper chromate is a fungicide? Copper has a melting point as well as a boiling point. The melting point is 1,982 degrees Fahrenheit, and the boiling point is 4,644 degrees Fahrenheit. Its density is 5.163 ounces per every cubic inch, which is basically 8.933 grams per cubic centimeter. And obviously it's a solid at room temperature. It's a little reactive. It dissolves in most acids and alkalis. Did you know that copper fluorosilicate is a fungicide used in grape vineyards? Okay, here's another interesting fact. When the air is moist, copper reacts with water and carbon dioxide, and it forms hydrated copper carbonate, which is basically Cu2OH2CO3. Hydrated copper carbonate has this greenish color, which is why some buildings that are coated with copper get that greenish sort of color over time. Copper is abundant on Earth, and it has an abundance of about 70 parts per million. Back in the day, people could find copper nuggets lying on the ground. But unfortunately, these things don't happen today. Nowadays, if you want some copper, you gotta get some minerals that are rich in copper, and you gotta get it from those minerals. Some of these minerals are copper carbonate, or copper sulfide, or copper iron sulfide, or copper oxide, and yeah, stuff like that. And so you just grab something that has copper in it, and then you gotta get the copper up. To get the copper from something that has copper, first you gotta get the copper into the form of copper sulfate, and then you react the copper sulfate with iron, and you get copper sulfate plus iron equals iron sulfate plus copper. China and the United States produce and mine a lot of copper. Did you know that copper is used in your everyday brass instrument? Items made of copper have been found as far back as 9,000 BC. By around 5,000 BC, people were commonly using copper in tools, knives, weapons, etc. The symbol for copper, Cu, comes from the Latin word cuprum, which once was an island of Cyprus, and the Romans got all their copper from that island. Copper is used in battery acid, fire retardants, fabric dye, food additives, for farm animals that is, fireworks, and photographic film. Here's the atomic structure for copper. As you can see, it has 29 protons and 35 neutrons. Did you know that copper methane arsenate is an algicide? Did you know that copper 8 quinolinolate is used to protect fabric from mildew? Copper, copper, copper. my god, I'm late for school. Cover presentation.